Hello and welcome to another episode of Addicted to Business. Around 6 months ago, Quickfire's journey changed significantly and for the better. And a lot of that was down to the man, the legend, that is Mr. Neil Foley. Welcome, sir.
Yeah, well, thank
Hello,
you very
Neil.
much, mate. That's a
all right,
great
wasn't it?
introduction. That's good. Nothing like you planned, but that was really good.
Well, as intros go, that was okay. I'll take that. So today, we'll jump straight in. We've got 45 minutes, ultimate value. I really want to talk about boards, having a balanced board, finding the right board, getting alignment between shareholders. I mean, the list goes on. And I dare say we'll overrun 45 minutes by some way. So we'll try and keep to time. But let's start with a little bit about you. Okay.
Who are you, Neil?
Who even is Neil Foley? So
Who is this guy?
The lovely thing is that when I started Norwich 5-6 years ago, and I'm going around, everyone says you must meet Neil Foley, or as it's been coined, Uncle Neil. So everyone's like, you've got to meet Neil. He's a great guy, blah, blah, blah. I meet him. I have the same opinion. So tell us, Neil, a little bit about your story and how you've got to where you are now.
It's a good opening line, isn't it? I guess there's only one advantage to getting old. There is literally only one advantage to getting old, is you just know more stuff. You experience more things, you see more things, and then you'll reach an age, won't you, when you'll gradually start to forget it as you drift into senility. But I haven't quite reached that bit yet. So the advantage of being old, the golden years, the advantage of being old is you just observe lots of stuff. And I think my journey has been running my own business for goodness knows how many years. Started a business from scratch, sold it to an international player, not for oodles of money, but a decent sum of money.
Yep.
Started a number of businesses, involved in different businesses, and I just immersed myself in the sort of the Norfolk business community, really.
And on that note, you've also set up a kind of networking kind of community, the Business Growth Club.
Business Growth Club is very much a social enterprise, which is about trying to help micro and small businesses to grow, using the experiences that I've gained over the lifetime. So practical experiences, not theoretical. We've got an MBA, which I did in 2011, but the reality is what I've learned from that is some really good people, but I didn't necessarily learn a great deal other than that. So I think it's just practical experience helping small businesses.
Fine. So first tip for anyone listening is to check that out, I guess, find it online and perhaps come along. Do they just come as a guest or how does that work?
Absolutely. There's 19 modules on there, which are a mixture of videos and Google Docs.
Yep.
They're all free. We have monthly meetings, businessgrowthclub.net. You'll find them. We tend to do them in Helsden.
Yep.
We get anything from 10, 15, 20 people there. No booking, because it just becomes a pain in the backside to book, and no fee either, because again, people turn up with cash, and I think they then want a receipt, and you think, I don't. So actually, just turn up.
Fine.
And meet some really interesting people. There's some fascinating businesses there, and everybody's really supportive, trying to grow.
Yeah.
Which is, if we support the local economy, then we all do so much better.
So of all the
really
podcasts we've hosted together, and I forgot to, is Stokely from the training.
Oh, hi, everyone, yeah.
Sorry, mate.
It's all right, don't worry.
But essentially, of all the podcasts and guests we've had on the podcast, this one's a very personal one to me because, of course, while I've known you for several years, 6 months ago, as we heard in the intro, you joined us at Quickfire as our non-exec. You've done non-execing for a series of companies now. What is it that makes a good non-exec?
That's a very good question. I think the whole point of having a non-exec is to have an outside view, and is to have somebody who's got the ability to challenge, but not in a confrontational way, but in a way of saying, look, are you sure you thought this through? And what about if? And what are the consequences? And is there an alternative route?
You're always questioning why.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think it's just trying to say, what's the purpose? What do you think you're going to get out of this? Because most of us probably make decisions too quickly. I think what happens is in particular when you're young and you're enthusiastic and the world's your oyster and you're really going for it and you're getting some success, it's very easy to make quick, snap decisions. And I think that's potentially very dangerous. So I think the role of a good non-exec should be to challenge in a non-confrontational way. I don't know the business the same as the business owners do, but you can see some stuff on the outside and think, you know what, I'm not sure about that, or just to challenge and push back a little bit. And I think that's the role of a good Ned.
Okay. And so we've had Marcus on a previous episode of this podcast, and he spoke very highly of Uncle Neil as well.
Oh, did he? Good old Marcus.
Can you be my uncle too?
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Hand out the business
I have to be
cards.
careful nowadays because nowadays, you have to be a little bit careful about the grooming and the rest of it. It's not quite as PC.
We'll
as
call
it
you the
used to
trendy
be.
uncle.
The
then.
trendy uncle.
Yeah, we'll go for that one then.
That sounds a bit better, yeah.
So what I'm looking to talk to today, we're going to have essentially different levels of an audience, right? We're going to have people at the very start of their journey.
Yep.
We're going to have people much further on. So let's start at the start and then escalate as we go forwards, okay? So right at the very start, realistically, probably not right for a non-exec. Yeah, it's going to be too early. When do you know you're ready for a non-exec? Is it a certain point of turnover or profit, or is it a certain size of headcount? When is it like, right, now's my time for a non-exec?
That's another good question. There's two on
Full
the
of good questions.
two on the
Who is this guy?
He's on fire
I've had my
today.
Weetabix today. Come on, sir.
I think I would change it slightly in terms of the question. I think you would nearly always need a mentor. I know you had Neil Adams as your first guy, and Neil's a fabulous fellow. So it's a mentor stroke coach, which maybe morphs into something more when you've probably got, 2 or 3 of you together rather than on your own. Because often, I think you started off on your own, didn't you?
Absolutely.
So I think a coach and a mentor who's got a bit more experience, been around a little bit, probably makes some sense. Money is always an issue when you're new, but it's a justifiable expense. And then that probably morphs into when you've got 2 or 3 directors with different skill sets, growing quite rapidly. That's when you should start thinking about either a coach for the board or a Ned for the board. That would be my take on it.
And a non-exec or a Ned doesn't have to be in the same sector, right?
No, absolutely.
And that's a bit of a myth out there, is that, you have to find someone that's trodden the exact same path. Actually, it's just as valuable sometimes getting someone from a totally different sector.
Why is that?
I think it's probably a variety of reasons. There might be times where you do want somebody who's really got experience in your sector because maybe they've got some technical expertise or some knowledge that you haven't got. But I think there's always a danger, isn't there, when you're trying to sort of say, well, I'll replicate what they've done. Is it something you can replicate?
Yeah.
Was there a degree of luck within the success that they had?
Sure.
In a technology sense, well, the technology will have moved on, massively since then. So what was right for them, and maybe they were just right place, right time. Maybe they weren't instrumental in the success that they had. There were other people involved with the team that you don't know.
Yeah.
So it becomes very cloudy, I think. So I think certainly having people with expertise in your sector can make sense, but I think just general business acumen and common sense probably is probably even more valuable, I think.
Okay, so I appreciate you do some non-executive work. I believe you also do a bit of mentoring and consulting as well at the early stage. So let's go back to that stage. You've decided you need a mentor.
Yep.
Why would they choose Neil Foley as opposed to someone else?
God knows.
And do you suggest that as a good bit of advice, aside from the kind of pitch of, we'd use Neil, would you suggest talking to 2 or 3 and having a bit of I always call it a bit of a beauty parade to say, actually, just because I think Neil's the right person for you, it doesn't mean that they're going to be right for you?
You're absolutely right in the sense that you need to get on with them.
Yeah.
You need to think that their experience is relevant to you. You do need to like each other. I think
Always
that's
helps.
quite important to do, because if you're going to be honest in a coaching relationship or mentoring, you're going to be brutal. You're saying stuff that is quite revealing, quite personal. So you do need that, I think. I think beauty parades always make sense, don't they? And but there's a lot of people peddling snake oil. There's a lot of people out there who will promise the earth and won't deliver.
Yeah.
I think my take would be, if you do it the right way, money shouldn't really be an issue. Now, there's always an issue in terms of cash flow, but money shouldn't really be an issue. Because if you work with people and do it the right way, you're going to work with them forever. Yeah. And they may dip in and out and come and go, but they'll recommend loads of people to you. And I've never really worried about it.
You think you will work forever? Because that's a really interesting point.
Yeah.
I've always found that a mentor may have their time period, and then a non-exec, a good mentor may not make a good non-exec, and a good non-exec may not make a good mentor. So should there be a consistency throughout, or should it be you run your course, you then change, you then get some fresh opinions and go again on the next stage of your journey.
Yes, I would say that. So
The
I
latter,
think
yeah.
working together for a long time, but you dip in and out of a relationship. So
Yeah.
you're absolutely right. You might get to the business where they're saying, you know what, we've got what we need from Neil. It's time for a change. Absolutely right, and the right thing to do. But your relationship with them is always strong.
Yeah.
So they're always going to be recommending you. They're always referring you to different people. You can always go back to them at a different time and say, look, I need a bit of help. So the relationships last forever. But you're right, the business relationship will change. In most cases, I think, as you see in the agency world, you'll get to a certain level and actually you're mixing with people with real specific experience that you can use, and that's exactly how it should be.
The businesses outgrow the non-execs or the mentors, effectively.
Yeah, and maybe you've taken everything you can from them. And
Yeah.
it's time to say somebody else's view and a different view actually has more value.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you would do. That'd make perfect sense, wouldn't it?
So if you've gone through the stage, you've had a mentor, you're now going into non-exec stage. I am as guilty as the next person of having too many cooks. Okay, so for anyone listening and watching, sometimes you have so many opinions, you can't get clarity because I'm chatting to Neil one day and I'm saying, and he's telling me we should go over here. And important, I change that. You're not telling me. I've always said you more hold up the mirror, right, to say, what about this? And you just challenge opinion. I'm like, Christ, I knew that answer. But actually, Neil's got it out of us, right? But then what I'll do is I'll go for lunch with someone else and dinner with someone else and someone else. Before I know it, I've got 4 opinions, all very different.
So why do you do that?
I do that because I'm keen to see the difference and make my own opinion. So I always think, okay, that's Neil's opinion. That's great.
So it's not that you're a tart.
No, well, that's what.
I always thought he was just a tart. I had no
Myth
idea.
exposed, live on air. No, I think that I'm always keen to say, okay, Neil's got experience from not in agency life, but a lot of business experience. Someone like a Marcus or whoever who's been in the agency game, Spencer Pitt again, that loads of different mentors I have. And actually getting a range of opinions. Again, when you run an experiment, you would never run it on a basis of one. Yeah, you would run it on
It's an
5
average,
or 6
isn't it,
and take an
essentially?
average.
Yeah.
But having said that, I think that sometimes that's not helpful. As we've talked about many times before, because I now have so many opinions. Yes, I have an average, but the average is somewhere in the middle. But actually, I either need to do that or that, not a bit of both. So how do you overcome that? It's so hard to just stick with something and go with it. How do you overcome that?
I think that's a fundamental question. Because if you tapped into Amazon, business books, my guess is there's probably close to 1 million. How can there be 1 million different ways to do a business? it's a nonsense, isn't it? But we're all looking for the easy answer. I was being facetious saying about being a tart, but the reality is it's a bit like, as I say, people looking for an easy answer. If you want a diet book, well, actually just eat less.
Yeah.
and eat more healthy. But life isn't as simple as that, is it? So we overcomplicate things. I think part of the danger that you have of talking to lots of different people is, as you say, you end up with lots of different opinions. The last person you spoke to might be the strongest in your mind. And actually, most of the time, you're better off doing something than doing nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So talk to people like Marcus and Spencer and Pete and people like that, as specialists in their field who've trodden your journey, absolutely. But then limit yourself in terms of the numbers, because otherwise you'll just get confused, and inactivity is the killer.
It's more about quality, isn't it, than quantity? I think in that regard.
And the fundamentals are the same. The fundamentals aren't going to change.
Yeah.
So it's all about how do you grow your market share? Do you understand who your ideal customer is? What's the niche that you're trying to fulfill? Because if you try and fulfill everything, you're going to end up with nothing. So you need to niche. How can you exploit that? Who can you joint venture with? What's your sales process like? How often, do you look after existing clients? Do they love you? Do you go back and see them and get referrals and recommendations and upsells? So the principles are the same.
Hold the phone. There was a lot of value just there, just chucked away as if it didn't even matter.
But it's easy stuff, isn't it? That's all easy stuff.
Well, easy for you maybe, but some people maybe not. So keep listening and listen to this part here. So let's do some role play. Okay. You are non-exec of the listener.
Yep.
Okay. We have no idea what their business is. We have no idea what position they're in. Where do we start?
What a question.
Full of them today.
Throw you under the bus.
Go on, show your worth.
I think the question would be, the first one would be, do you understand your market?
Yeah.
Do you really understand who your target market is in the niche? Now, you can have multiple target markets, but you have to have a different message for each one.
Okay.
Most small businesses don't. Most small businesses, of course, they're chasing cash because life's difficult. So they end up doing everything and saying, yes, I can do that and I can do this, and portraying themselves as being bigger than they are.
Yeah.
Whereas actually what you should be doing is saying, no, I'm an expert, but just in this bit.
Yeah.
So and it's a bit like the number of new photographers that you meet. There's a lot of photographers. And people will say, well, I'm a commercial photographer, but that's far too broad.
Yeah.
So what is your niche? What is it you're really good at? And that's what they should focus on. And is your market big enough in that niche for you to actually make it viable for you so you can make a living?
Okay.
And then you look at your sales process. So in the same way as we wouldn't go into a department, you wouldn't have, if you wandered around Norwich and you were going into John Lewis and you had to buy something, you'd never go in.
Yeah.
So you need to think of yourself as a department store and say, well, where are your wares? What have you got on show? What can people dip their toe in? What can they have a look at before they actually, even have to speak to you?
Yeah.
So what's the quality of your website? What's the quality of your soft offers and your PDFs? And how are you demonstrating experience and expertise? How are you doing that?
Yeah.
And most people aren't. Most people are saying, well, my price is X or whatever. And I wouldn't be frightened of price either. That would be another really strong one to say. People expect to see prices. I'm looking for a new piece of software at the moment, so I've been doing a bit of research last night. A couple of websites haven't got a price on. So do you think, oh, well, that's reasonable, I'll engage with them? Or do you think, what are they trying to hide?
Yes, yeah,
well,
exactly.
why aren't you just being transparent? Just tell me what the frigging price is.
Yeah.
And then I'll make my mind up as whether it's worth doing. And small businesses don't tend to do that. And they should.
Yeah.
Because you demonstrate expertise, you demonstrate you're confident.
So on the sales process, we've had a recent podcast with Matt Sykes. I know a great
Good
friend
old
of yours,
Matt.
brilliant
Yeah,
guy.
good fella.
Yeah.
One thing that's always stuck out to me is I think you call them the business multipliers.
Yep.
Are we okay to disclose those?
Absolutely.
Oh.
They're not secret.
I thought they were on the special,
No.
special ingredients.
And
So,
they're not secret to me either. I mean, they're
Fine.
well known.
so please share with the audience the magical multipliers, or whatever you call them, because I think they're invaluable.
There's three things you need to do in business, in essence. You need to generate inquiries. So you need to generate leads from people who know what they know what you're about. They have an idea of what they want. So you need to generate leads, which is what most people spend all of their time doing. Probably 70% of people's time and money goes on generating leads. It's actually really hard to do, but generating leads in a digital world in particular. But then the second bit, which people don't do, is you need a sales process. How do you convert that person who goes into the department store and has a look? So they come off the pavement, they go into the department store to have a look. How do you then convert them? What's the sales process? Most people haven't got that.
Okay.
Or it depends whether I speak to Nathan or I speak to Stokey or I speak to George.
Whoever,
It depends what the result I get. And if everybody's busy, actually, you know what, I get nothing.
Yeah.
So you need a sales process which is very clearly defined, which is, and everybody needs this. Very few people have that. And then the third bit you need to actually customer maximization. So how do you look after existing clients? As we know, they're 5 to 8 times more likely to buy from you than a new person because they know you, they trust you, they like you, they'll spend more money. So how do you look after them? How do you go back and revisit them and see what their changing needs are, sell them different products and services, do joint ventures? Most companies don't do that. So they're the three business multipliers. If you get your lead generation right, get your sales process right, and then look after your existing clients, you get a multiplier effect rather than just trying to, we'll tweak the leads and see if we can get
So if we were using one word or phrase for each, it'd be lead gen, conversion, and then what, upsell, cross-sell?
I call it maximization in terms of just making sure your existing clients are happy. The stats are, it depends which survey you go to, but the stats are broadly the same. Between 65 and 68% of your clients will drift away and go to another supplier.
Why is that?
Because of indifference. That's the staggering figure. It's indifference. It's not because they found a better price. Some will go because of a better price. Some will die. Some will go out of business. Some will move away. But actually, the vast majority is because actually you've shown total, complete, and utter indifference to them. And somebody else is fluttering their eyelids over here and saying, And if you think
crazy, because you spent all this time generating leads and
which cost you 70% of your time.
and taking dinners, all sorts, and now you're just going to lose them.
Mobile phone companies do it, banks do it, insurance companies do it. All the big players are extremely guilty of doing just that. And what happens, that's the mindset. So whereas what you should be doing is smothering people in value and really loving them, and then they will refer you, recommend you, do your Google reviews, do all the stuff you want, and actually they're free because you've got them already.
Yeah, exactly right.
So that's what people should be doing, but that's why that's the multipliers, the 3 business multipliers. They work really well.
Yeah.
It's not rocket science.
Okay, so there's other tools and systems and tricks you use, and I believe they can be found on your website and some of those resources.
Tricks.
Not tricks.
Are you a pony?
Golden nuggets, baby.
Golden nuggets.
Golden nuggets. So for anyone listening, I'm sure they're frantically scribbling down all this information. So you've got the 3 multipliers. You've gone through. You've identified the target market. You've started refining the proposition. Now what?
No, you need to do it.
Well, we joke, but actually that's a massive
very hard,
right? Because so many people are like, right, I've got all the answers now, but actually now you've got to put it into practice.
Yeah.
Saying it and doing it is
that's the hard
two different things completely.
And I think this is something that I've learned over the years. This is the tortoise and the hare, if you like. There's a temptation, isn't there, in particular in new in business, that they charge out and try stuff because you're excited and you're keen and your back's against the wall.
Yeah.
Whereas what you should be doing is looking for incremental change and just saying, I'll just devote a little bit of my time today to the sales process. So I'm not going to spend, blank out the day for it, because that day will never come.
Yeah.
Because you'll think, right, I'm going to do this on Friday. So on Friday, I'm going to nail my sales process. And then you get busy and other things happen and the phone rings or you get an email that you need to respond to. So what you should do is just plan probably half-hour sections of time, short periods of time to say, I will work on my sales process over this period. And then, lo and behold, over something like 30 days, suddenly you've got a lot of time.
Yeah.
It's the same with prospecting. People don't like prospecting. Nobody, who the hell would?
Yeah.
And the same with sales. I know Matt's a great salesman that you've had on and clearly loves what he does, but most people don't. So you put it off. But it's doing small incremental amounts, and that's how the tortoise beats the hare. And the parable of that is centuries old, and it's as true today as it was then.
Sure. So let's look at one topic I'm really keen to explore with you, which is accountability.
Okay.
So some people will get a mentor, a consultant, a NED, whatever, for accountability. Some people will go with a business partner. Yeah. And I guess a lot of people listening to here today, and I'm one of 3, and Stokely's one of 2, and actually I'm sure both of us agree that we wouldn't be where we are in our journey if it wasn't for our other partners.
Completely.
So for those listening that are maybe in partnership, let's dive into a little bit of that, because I think it's very important to be honest and transparent. Sometimes partnerships can be tough.
I think they're nearly always tough. Never mind sometimes. I think they are very, very difficult.
And why are they tough?
I've been involved.
I can tell you the answer.
Yeah. I've been involved in a partnership. When I first started the business I sold, I was in partnership with another fella. You have different expectations. You work in different ways. Yeah. You work at a different pace.
And important, just to jump in here, we're absolutely advocating partnership, but we're just saying if you understand these things, it will make life a bit easier.
Yes, absolutely.
I think understanding is the key word here, isn't it? Yeah. Is understanding.
And being open and honest, as I think Nathan said, so some transparency. There's also a bit about having it very clearly defined that when things are going well, so in the honeymoon period, when you're excited, you most certainly should sit down and say, what are we going to do if things go wrong? What are we going to do if we fall out or decide we want to take the business in a different direction?
Hard to do, right? Because at that time, it doesn't feel like anything can stop you.
No, and that's the time to do it. So to rationally, without emotion, to say, well, what's going to happen? Because a lot of businesses will evolve. Everything's evolved. There was a great program on Amazon last night on the telly, and crikey, he's gone from selling books to look what he's doing now, and Amazon Web Servers and everything else. It's extraordinary. So when at the early stage, just define what you're going to do. So what happens if our views diverge? What happens if we want to go a different direction? How are we going to split the business up, etc.? And that then that's true whether you're a partnership or you're a legal entity in the sense of a limited company.
Yeah.
So it's that's the bit of advice I would do. But working together with somebody makes perfect sense. Yeah. Because there's 2 of you or 3 of you or 4 of you or 5 of you.
Specialists, and I know you're a big advocate of the book Traction. Yeah, and they talk a lot about kind of getting people in the right seats.
Yep.
And I think that's really important, is specialists rather than generalists, and being open and honest to say, you know what, I'm not the best at that. Yep. Actually, there's someone here better, that I know, like, and trust, and I will get them involved in the business. And actually, a business journey can sometimes be very lonely. So having someone there that you can share the highs and the lows with, I think is really important.
And also, there's a couple of bits you touched on there. It can be very lonely, but be cautious giving away equity.
Yeah.
I think it's very easy early on to give away equity, which is ultimately none of us are going to, very few of us are going to have something that you're going to sell for tens of millions or whatever.
Sure.
But it's just giving away control and equity you can't get back.
Especially something that you've gave birth to,
and something you've sweated over and had the sleepless nights as we all have, and the rest of it. So be cautious on equity, but it is a lonely place, and most successful businesses are going to surround themselves with people who are much better than they are.
Yeah,
that's so true.
That's got to be the way.
The key that I've learned, my business journey, I started off by myself, and then I met up with Adam, who we've been friends for years since, and then we joined a partnership. But I did it for a year, maybe a year and a half, and I couldn't do it by myself. What I realised was that I needed someone to keep me accountable. I needed someone to question, like a non-exec would possibly do, everything that I'm doing, and I needed someone to do the stuff that I couldn't do. I often laugh and joke, and I often call Adam boring, but that's because he does all the business growth and the spreadsheets and stuff. But I can't do that as a creative, and so I think having a business partnership where you have two different skill sets is key. I think
that's a really good point, Stokely. In terms of we've got one in our business, Martin. We call him the fun prevention officer.
Yeah,
that's actually the business would be screwed without him. He's brilliantly talented at what he does.
Stops you from spending money, puts everything in spreadsheets. Exactly,
but it's so important. And if we didn't have that, then we'd go off the rails, right? Because we'd be going for lunch and dinner every single day, and partying hard, and that's just our personality type. But actually, it's so important that with a business you have a balance, and that takes us on to our nice thing around a balanced board. And so if you have one or two directors, and typically a non-exec to kind of balance it out, but actually more directors, sometimes more board members. And how do you make sure that you've got the right balance?
Boards are difficult in the sense that you don't want too many people. Yeah. The bigger the board. If you think of government, we've got people who are in the cabinet. Just done a cabinet reshuffle, hasn't he, Boris? So got lots of people in the cabinet. Do the cabinet make decisions? They actually don't, because they're too big. It's the inner cabinet that makes the decisions, so there's probably half a dozen people who really make the decisions within government. And it's the same with a company. If you end up with a really big board, then not a lot's going to happen. It's going to be very difficult to make decisions.
And every small decision is going to take time, and sometimes, although you said quick decisions sometimes aren't the best, but sometimes you do need to make quick decisions.
Sometimes, absolutely.
And important quick decisions.
Yep.
And a lot of the time with more people, it's difficult, isn't it?
And I think you need to understand, in my perspective, the fundamentals of human behaviour. In that, I think there's only 5 or 6 business books you need to read. And one of them...
Perfect. Stay tuned. Here we go.
Are any of them here?
Actually, some of them are here.
Oh, right. Great.
Normally because they've sent them in by post. So, read this book.
But one of the best from a committee/board viewpoint was published by Northcote Parkinson in 1953 or 54.
Sounds really interesting.
It's looking unlikely this down there.
It's a fantastic book. It's written about his time working in the Admiralty. Well, he was in the Army, but he was talking about the Admiralty, which is about how ineffective committees are. And how ineffective your big committees are. Yeah. And you get somebody who's a committee member who is quiet for a long time and then feels they've got to say something because I've been quiet. So what they'll do is they'll not be quiet. They'll be quiet on the big stuff, which is the really difficult stuff. But actually the minor stuff, actually, you know what, I can go to town on this irrelevant point here and prove that actually I'm a good person to have in the room. It's a fabulous read. You can get it on Amazon or second-hand bookshops for about £10.
Okay. So what is the perfect board? What is the perfect balance of, what is your perfect balance of a board?
In terms of numbers, I think you probably don't need more than 5.
Okay.
I think ideally you might need more than that if it's a really big company, but the companies I work with is probably 3 to 5. Yeah. I think you need a perfect mix within a company as different skill sets.
Okay.
And then being very clear on what your skill sets are.
In terms of sales and marketing, finance, people, ops, etc.
That's bigging up Fountain. That's one of the things I think is Fountain's great strength.
Absolutely.
Is what could have been a very difficult scenario because of the personal relationships with them, but they're very clear on what their roles are. Yeah. And when the board meetings they have, they're people can question, people can seek clarification, but people haven't got a view to say, you're not doing that right, or what about this, that, and the other. There's a huge amount of respect to say, this is what I'm responsible for. So question, seek clarification, but actually don't tell me how to do my job.
Well, that's the thing. You can't question someone when you can't do it yourself.
Yeah.
We spoke about this the other week. Like, I can't tell Adam to question I can't question the finance of Adam, even though I can't do it.
Well, you could seek clarification.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
how does that work?
Yeah, of course.
And then it comes down to the relationship between you, because if you say, I think you got that wrong, and your relationship isn't too strong, then naturally you're going to get very defensive and say, well, what do you mean? What do you know about it? Yeah. Whereas actually, if you say, look, just reassure me, are we on the right lines?
Yeah.
What if I just played devil's advocate for a second, what if this?
Yeah.
They say that in terms of, just to go off piece, just a little bit.
No, fine.
One of the key things that you should say to a doctor, because when you go and see your GP, they're human beings.
Oh, off piece do we go?
Yeah, we're going well off piece.
Well off piece.
Down the side track.
Crash outs, folks.
Yeah, we might have to turn the cameras off in a second. No, they're human beings like the rest of us who make very snap decisions and very quick decisions. When they see you walk in, they hear a little bit, they've made a decision, and they're 7 minutes of a when they're going to try and give you a diagnosis. So one of the key questions I heard a doctor say you should ask another doctor is to say, okay, if it wasn't that you've just said is wrong with me, what else could it be? Just to force them to think, okay, what else could it be? So that you could use within a board to say, okay, I take your point on that, but you know what, Adam, if that wasn't true, what would the scenario look like? It's quite a clever way of doing it.
Very clever way. I like that.
So we've done a bit of healthcare as well in here now.
Because there we are, unlimited value. So
solved all our problems.
Let's dive in even deeper. You have sat in many board meetings. Where typically do they fall down?
I think there's...
Keeping to time, maybe one of them. That's a very personal one.
And I think that translates across business partnerships as well. Where does
absolutely. Sometimes I think the issues... we're all politicians, aren't we? We're not mean to be, but we're all politicians. So there's always a degree of politics going on. And sometimes I think we'd be better if we had brutal honesty.
Okay.
But remove the personal attacks from it. More about saying, I don't get that. I'm sorry. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm not saying you're doing it badly, but I don't understand it, and I don't think it's right.
Sure.
And I think that bit of... I know we like to knock Amazon. Everybody likes to knock Amazon, don't they? I mean...
even though we use them.
We all like to knock them. They have a fabulous thing on one of their websites, which is about recruitment. And it talks about if you go and work for them, this is what they expect. And one of the things they expect is, in a meeting, you challenge and you seek clarification, and you can be as bullshit as you like. But once you make a decision and you have an agreement, that's it. Then you commit. And I love that. I actually think that's really... So you can challenge and say, Nathan, I think you're wrong, and this is why I think you're wrong. And you can say, well, your assumptions are wrong because of X, Y, Z. And we can argue and then say, okay, but when we reach an agreement, when we go out the door, we're doing it together. Yeah. And I think if more boards did that...
Just be more upfront and more straight with each other.
Remove the personality bit.
Well, business is business, friendship is friendship.
Yeah.
Separate the two.
Yes.
And that's how it works.
That's the... So the old Edward de Bono bit, have you heard of Edward de Bono?
No.
Have you heard of Edward de Bono?
No.
He was he must have been a psychologist, I guess, who talked about different hats. He was the guy who came up with the
I talk about it all the time.
That's where it comes from. Edward de Bono was brilliant at saying, look, just and it was a way of separating, saying, look, I'm putting our friendship aside. Look, putting my business hat on, or my accountant's hat on, or my money hat on. I don't understand, Nathan. What are you doing on X, Y, Z? And that is a great way of doing that. So Edward de Bono, he's a good guy.
No, I'm going to check him out. That's
he's a wait.
We thought we coined that term, didn't we?
Sorry, Nathan. Lomax.
Sorry.
Nothing original anymore.
Fine. Okay, so we've gone through a bit about boards and partnerships and everything else. One thing that really struck a chord earlier is you said something about equity and that people give away equity and everything else. But actually, a lot of people go in with a vision to sell, but actually sometimes selling isn't as easy, right? And there is another way, and that's the whole taking some kind of building a passive revenue and kind of dialing down time and freeing up time. Let's explore that a little bit further, because I'm sure a lot of people here listening watching may have kind of thought, okay, I'm going to get in this business, or I'm about to start a business. Maybe they're in employment and they're about to start a business because they want to sell and the bright lights of sale. But before you do that, sometimes sell isn't always the right option?
I think there's a lot of nonsense talked about exit planning. I really do, and it drives me nuts. In the sense that the concept of thinking about exit makes perfect sense because the business cannot be solely about you, or about you and the founders, or you and your partners. Because if the business is entirely focused around you as individuals, then what are you selling? Because I can't replicate you, so therefore when you go, actually the business folds. So what you're trying to do is to have process, which is where, Michael Gerber's bit about the E-Myth is all the process. Think of it as a franchise model. So how do you process it? That's where the strengths are. That's where you identify the weaknesses and stuff like that. So exit planning from that viewpoint makes perfect sense. But doing it to think part of the Western culture is to say, well, what I need is an exit plan, and I'm going to be the next Uber and WeWorks and all these companies that have colossal turnover and even bigger losses. It just makes no sense. And I think it's the wrong mindset, because I think part of the mindset when you're thinking about exit is it's almost like you're trying to pass the parcel. So I want to pass the parcel on to somebody else, and as long as I can do it before the music stops and people realize it's a crock of shit, then actually I'm okay. And that's what's happened with a lot of the really big tech companies, which is insane. Yeah. And it's permeated our thinking, and it's wrong. I think it's more about saying, actually, what I want to do is build something that's sustainable, that will make a difference to the world that I live in, and make a difference to the people who work in the company that I'm with. But selling it doesn't have to be the option. Maybe I want to take more of a back seat, and I'll get smarter people than me around who can run the company, who can actually take over, or maybe do a management buyout in the future at some point, or you can do some share equity. People like Richer Sounds is the most successful retailer in Europe in terms of selling. That he sells more per square foot of shop space than any other retailer. Okay. Most of his employees have been at the company 10, 15 years. They're a phenomenal length of time. He gifted his shares last year to an employee-owned trust. Right. So that he gave the company to his employees and said, you own it. They do fantastically well. And that's a brilliant example. He's not a socialist. Yep. He's a capitalist, but he's saying, actually, you know what? I've got enough money. I want to look after my staff, and they just do fantastically well. He's a great role model to follow. And he's up against online retailers. He's up against Amazon. He's up against some really big players. And you know what? He holds his own.
So, conscious of time, and there's still more value we can get out of Uncle Neil, I know.
Go
so,
what's
let's talk
trendy Uncle Neil.
Yeah. Let's talk structure. Okay, structure of board meetings. Because what I want is for people listening and watching to be able to say, amazing nugget, golden nugget rather than trick, loaded. I'm going to take that into my business today. One of the things that's really helped us, and I'm happy to share this, is a structure of our board meetings in terms of the agenda. And we consistently refined our agenda until we got it right. And I believe the last meeting we had is probably one of the best meetings we've had. So let's share that structure. Can you remember it?
Yeah, I can. And actually,
well, you wrote it, so
and it's a fair point that they evolve. And to be that agenda wasn't my agenda. That agenda came from the book Traction.
Good.
Which is a fantastic book. I really, really like that book. It's because it's an amalgamation of other ideas that people have got and had, and I think they've done it really well. And the idea is that you start off with 4 or 5 5-minute slots, which is you do a segue, which is very much about what's gone well within the business since we last met. So it's a bit of reconnection. Yeah. You talk about some of the personalities in terms of employees or customers that good news.
Importantly, all of this is good stuff.
Yep.
Yeah.
If there are, you talk about rocks, which are like your 90-day or your quarterly target for you as an individual. Yeah. Which everybody in the business should have a rock. But within the management team, it should be you probably got 2 or 3 rocks that you're just saying, I'm not saying I'm going to do it tomorrow, but by the end of this quarter, this will be done. This will be done, yeah. And the crucial thing is that you then say anything that's not done, you don't discuss it. So this hasn't gone well, or this hasn't been done. You don't discuss it there and then, which is when you end up going down the rabbit hole. You say, okay, that's for later in the meeting, and you have this thing called IDS, where you identify, discuss, and then solve the problem. And so you end up having the 60 minutes of the meeting is discussing these IDS issues, which is very much saying, we've now got a list of 12 things. We're not going to get through 12. What are the top 3? Yeah. And as a team, you then discuss and say, well, the top 3 is actually, that's the one we need to nail. Okay, Now let's discuss it. Why is this happening? What's going on, etc. So you devote the time to the really important issues. And it's just a great structure, isn't it? And it worked really well.
It's been phenomenal. And then after IDS, you kind of take your actions.
Yep.
You
Inform
finish
the
your
team.
meeting. And we're saying that a typical board meeting or kind of meeting between directors or whatever, partners, should be what, 2 hours?
I think it's 90 minutes
90
to 2
minutes.
hours.
And how frequent?
I think there probably isn't a magic answer there, Nathan. I think it's more about what's needed. If it needs to be weekly, it needs to be fortnightly, whatever it needs to be.
That's a nice point about magic answers. One thing I have strived for in life and in business is for the magic answer or the quick win. And actually, one of the biggest learnings you've helped to teach me and us is that actually sometimes there is no substitute for time and you can't shortcut certain things. I think that's really important for anyone listening and watching, that while we can give all the tips in the world, and that's the whole point of these podcasts, right, is to share as much value and to help people and shortcut their process. Some things you just can't shortcut. You just have to ride the wave or kind of run the marathon to experience it.
You just have to work through them. And there was a nugget there that you said in terms of there is no magic bullet.
Okay.
And I think when people look for the magic bullet is when they end up being the tortoise and the hare scenario. They end up being the hare. There's some new shiny toy over here. There's something over here. Oh, what about that? Oh, this will work, etc.
Yeah.
There's a shortcut. I found a shortcut to lead generation. No, you haven't, because there isn't one.
Yeah.
Actually, it's graft, isn't it? If you're doing lead generation
It's just
digitally,
activity, right?
it's split testing, it's trying things, it's tweaking, it's looking for incremental change. So people are looking for this magic bullet, and they are with fitness, they are with healthy eating, they are with, you name it, people are looking for the magic bullet. There isn't one. Yeah. It doesn't exist. But people want it, rather than saying, actually, just do the hours, do the work,
do the graft
grunt.
and stick to the process.
Yeah, have the
consistency.
Have the successes
and
and
give it the
failures.
time,
Fall
right?
over and pick yourself up and carry on.
This is it. And so many people, me included, definitely have a new process. We're like, this is what we're going to do. And then 3 weeks later, you're like, decided we're going to change. We're going to go over there. And you go, well, crumbs, you haven't even given that one a chance yet. You've got to give it at least 6 months.
Tis the tortoise and the hare.
Yeah.
You know, Marcus Aurelius, one of the great Roman emperors and philosophers, talked about he was the 2nd century AD, was talking about, for goodness sake, concentrate like a Roman, commit, do something, stop getting distracted. You think, blimey, if he was saying that, 1,800 years ago, imagine what it's like now. We're still the same. Whereas actually, just commit.
And I think it's easy to get distracted, right? Because there is so many other choices. And there's a lot of people out there spouting, and like you said, some kind of poisonous kind of people, maybe not giving the advice that perhaps should be given. And I think that sums up today quite nicely, that actually there are good eggs out there, and we absolutely advocate finding people to support you on your journey. You don't have to go it alone. Contact someone like Uncle Neil or somebody else and help you on that journey. So Neil, where can people find out more about you and engage with you and perhaps take you for coffee or whatever? How do people start that process?
It has to be good coffee.
Okay.
Not interested in Costas or Starbucks. It's got to be good coffee.
Better change our coffee machine.
You notice I always drink water when I come here, Nathan.
Yeah, well, lesson learned.
Essentially, it's businessgrowthclub.net or LinkedIn. I know you've done a podcast with Mark White, who's a fantastic LinkedIn guru. He's really good. So LinkedIn or Business Growth Club. And I'm very happy to meet, lots of people I know. I'm very well connected. And I just like looking at different opportunities. And if the people are right, then we'll work together.
I forgot one bit.
And what was that?
One bit I really want to talk to you very quickly is around a mentor can sometimes help you on your personal journey, not just your business journey. And one thing we found is that we have meetings as directors, but actually we also have meetings as 3 directors individually with you, Neil, to kind of shape our own paths, which is invaluable as well. So that's another thing. The mentoring journey doesn't strictly just have to be business. You can have conversations outside of that as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, life can be tough sometimes, can't it?
Absolutely. Well, Neil, thank you. I really appreciate you coming on. It's been, as always, incredibly entertaining.
It's been a pleasure.
I can't believe we've got 45 minutes without swearing. That's phenomenal.
Sadly, I think I did.
Oh, I'll bleep it out.
No, you can't edit.
Fine. No, I really appreciate that. I hope everyone listening and watching has found it useful. Thank you for watching Addicted to Business, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.